Well, hello YouTube crew. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. This watch is not for sale. It's already been sold. But its transient presence in my hands gives me an excuse to share, and I thought you would appreciate the opportunity to examine a legend up close. This is the Philippe Dufour Simplicity, of course created by Mr. Philippe Dufour, a watchmaker of extraordinary credentials. It was launched back in 2000 and is only built in a handful of examples per year, to the extent that roughly 220 have been fabricated since 2000. Scarce is the word. Now, there have been two traditional case sizes, 34 millimeters and 37 millimeters. This is the 37 millimeter case in platinum, and you can see the watch is broad without actually being large. It's 8.7 millimeters thick, 46.6 millimeters from lug to lug, and there's a 19 millimeter spacing between the lugs. Thrown it on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see it's relatively thin, easily fits underneath the cuff. It does have the impression of a large watch on the wrist because of the strength of those lugs. They make themselves seen and known, but they're not terribly broad, and as you can see, they are arced to wrap around the wrist. So I believe you could wear this watch on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters circumference. There are no issues whatsoever there. Down the barrel, you can see plenty of clearance on each side of my wrist. The strap is impressive, given how few watches Mr. Dufour has actually made under his own name. The fact that he has his own branded straps is a nice touch. Rectangular scale alligator leather on the top. Between medium and large rectangular scale, you can see all black, semi-gloss, monotone stitch with sheer cut sides and a little bit of bolstering to add some volume. And then it's round red scale alligator leather on the bottom. Gator on both sides is upscale. It is a bit more durable and a bit more expensive, but a watch like this is always worth it. Now, the buckle is a custom piece from Mr. Dufour. You can see it is white gold compared to the platinum of the case. And when you check out the crown, you'll note it too is white gold. Taking a quick look, you can see that the crown itself is not branded, but it has a wonderfully sharp knurling and it's a pleasure to turn. The lugs are remarkably strong. They are probably the most outgoing element of this design, as everything else is subtle. You can see that they're constructed separately from the case, then welded together with that sharp break line between case and lug, created by manually removing the evidence of the welding of the two together. So that sharp crease between lug and case in separate lug, welded lug construction, this is haute de gamme case making of the highest level. No corners were cut here. The case itself features a domed bezel, a domed case back, and a mid-case that's sharply rounded and defined by the boundaries of the lip of the case back and the bezel. So it has these strong horizontals, lines that run all the way around the case, defining its shape, its midsection. And if you look, there's almost a law of thirds here with the bezel, the mid-case, and the case back. Mathematically a pleasing ratio. Taking a quick look at the dial, what surprises me most is that the dial maker is credited. Metalem, a high-end dial manufacturer that works with many, is located in Loloc, Switzerland, and here Metalem is credited alongside Philippe Dufour and the acknowledgement that this is a Swiss-made watch. The timepiece features a lacquer dial. It's a white lacquer. It looks a lot like enamel, but it is a lacquer, and it features transferred radially arrayed Roman numerals outboard with a railroad-style track for reading the minutes, and then there's a sunken sub-register with radially arrayed Arabic numerals and its own small railroad track. Now, there's a counterweighted leaf-style or feuille-style hand for the seconds, and then brigade-style hands for the hours and the minutes. These are fired steel, so the real deal, not chemically dyed, not painted or lacquered. They're fired, and they're fired remarkably well, as there's an even blue over all three hands. A lot of times you see a sort of tarnish, oxidation, or gradient effect, where some parts of fired hands will be darker, others lighter, and they almost look like a kaleidoscope of color. Getting it even is difficult. Now, they're brigade-style hands in honor of a master who has inspired Philippe Dufour, and you can see that the minute hand is also manually rolled on a miniature roller so that it arcs under the curvature of the sapphire. At center, you can see that the inner portion of the hands, you can see this to good effect, black polished, and then the cannon pinion itself of the movement has also been black polished. Turn the movement over, and we'll talk about the tech real quick. It's a manual wind 21 joule movement with an 18,000 vibration per hour beat rate. It does not hack. It has a 52-hour power reserve, and all of this is water resistant to 30 meters, but don't push your luck. The timepiece has extraordinary architecture. So aside from all of the basics, from the free-sprung architecture to the overcoil to the 52-hour reserve to the 2.5 hertz beat rate, all of that is really just peripheral because you're going to wind the watch every day, you're going to treat it well, and it's the tactile pleasure of winding this watch that sets it apart. You can see that the click spring over the ratchet wheel is partially obscured. You can see the point where it interacts with the teeth of the ratchet wheel is actually hidden underneath the barrel bridge. But you can see that the click spring is entirely black polished. There are two pegs with black polished tops that help to physically locate the root of the spring on the barrel bridge, and then you can see there's a screw holding them in place. But you'll also note that so well finished and fabricated is the part that it's literally flush with the bridge. It doesn't protrude above, it doesn't sink below. It is completely flush with the bridge. The top of the click spring, as you can see, is vaulted with a rounded profile, and it's black polished on its top. The teeth of the ratchet wheel are individually polished inboard, and if you look very closely with high definition optics, you will be able to see that the interior of these teeth have been polished just like the bevels of the bridges. Now, the Côte de Genève are deeply ridged and broad. They're a lot wider than standard Geneva waves. You can also see that they're dark on one side and light on the other. This is often lost on cheaper versions of Côte de Genève, especially the type that are stamped. These have been laid down with an abrasive wheel, and you can see not only are they deep and broad, not only is the color gradient dramatic, but the actual graining that the abrasive wheel makes is remarkably deep and overt. It's easy to see with the naked eye. There are two plaques, and these feature the only fired blue screws in the watch. They're used to fix the individual numbering. Guess a number between 1 and 220, and you've got a good chance of being right. And you can see both the individual number plate and the maker's mark are in gold. They're both satin finished and then engraved with beveled or polished edges, and they're held by those fired blue screws. You can see that this is not perfect, and that's beautiful in its own way. As the 21 joule signature, if you look very closely, L and S aren't perfectly spaced or aligned with each other, and that's the nature of a truly handmade watch. Obviously, laser ablation or CNC would do a whole lot better, but who needs that? It's the mark of the man, and remember, even a master is a man. And that's what makes this watch what it is. It's the mark of the man. If you look at the beveling, it's the best in the business. Ultra broad and mirrored. It's actually finished off with pieces of soft local vegetation that Philippe Dufour harvests in the Vallée de Joux where he does his work. It's not just that they're broad and bright, it's that they're drawn out horizontally over the top of the bridge, making them extraordinarily large, such that you can really appreciate this anglage without magnifying optics. And if you look closely, not only do we have the much ballyhooed interior angles, for example, here, 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 and here, and the crease between the two bevels is remarkably sharp in each case, but we also have exterior angles, here, here, and here, just across from the stud holder. These are devil's horn-like tips that come to a fine razor-like point. And you can see the two flanking the center wheel. That is more difficult to achieve than the interior angles. This watch gives you both. You can also see that the base plate does feature engine turning, though it's not as overt because you can't see much of it. And then there is a spiral satin grain as well as mirrored beveling across the bridge that holds the anchor in place. There is a black polished cap for the escape wheel, a black polished cap for the stud holder. You have the black polished screw heads, every single one of which has been black polished. Its slot chamfered and its circumference chamfered. These are the proverbial 100 Swiss franc screws. They take hours to make each. And then you can see that the click spring as well as its root, black polished. The timepiece, of course, features a overcoil hairspring made by hand. You can see it beaten away at 18,000 vibrations per hour. It is fired blue, blue oxidized, to prevent any corrosion over time and physical degradation of the overcoil. And Philippe Dufour makes some of these components from scratch. Others are brought in from suppliers and then finished by Philippe Dufour, proving that even in the case of the master who can do everything, Swiss watchmaking is still a collaborative business. Now, the watch does feature a free-sprung balance, and you can see the variable inertia weights on the arms of the balance as it oscillates away. Keep in mind, this represents the ultra haute de gamme, the top of the line. haute horlogerie at the craft level by a master who is at the top of his game. So to the extent that this watch isn't perfect, it just represents the limitations of human beings. In every regard, it's extraordinary and a pleasure. Remember, guys, this one's not for sale, just for the feast of the eyes. Time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on. Hey, we can dream, right?